Welcome back everyone. Today we are stepping into the pages of history to look at one of the most important cars ever built, the 1908 Ford Model T, sometimes remembered as the Ford Mustang T by mistake, but in truth it was the Model T that changed the world. This was the car that transformed automobiles from being a luxury item for the wealthy into a product that ordinary families could own, a machine that didn't just roll on four wheels but rolled society into a new era. When Henry Ford introduced this car in 1908, he wasn't simply selling transportation, he was shaping modern mobility. In this review, I'm going to take you back in time to explore the exterior design, the interior, the performance, the price, and how this car touched people's lives in ways far beyond driving. Looking at the exterior of the 1908 Model T, it was a machine designed with simplicity and utility in mind. Cars of that time often looked like motorized carriages, and the Model T carried that influence but with a touch of sturdiness that made it unique. From the front, the tall, thin wheels with wooden spokes immediately stood out, rising above the high ground clearance that made the car capable of handling unpaved roads and muddy paths. The headlights were small but functional, usually powered by acetylene gas lamps in the earliest models, giving just enough light for nighttime travel in an era before electricity was common in rural America. The upright front grille wasn't flashy, it was a simple, flat design that housed the engine and gave the car a straightforward, no-nonsense look. Moving to the side, you notice the carriage-like profile, with its open body design and exposed fenders. The wheels sat proudly outside the frame, and the step boards made entry possible since the car was quite high off the ground. The overall side silhouette was clean and purposeful, not luxurious, but durable. At the back, the Model T often carried a simple trunk area or a small platform, and the rear lights were minimal or absent on the earliest versions, as road laws were still developing. The rear view emphasized functionality rather than beauty, but there was a certain charm in its tall, narrow stance that gave it an iconic image in history. Climbing into the interior of the 1908 Ford Model T, you instantly realize how different driving was more than a century ago. The cabin was basic, built mostly of wood and metal, with seats upholstered in simple leather. There were no luxury touches, no modern dashboards, no digital gauges. Instead, the interior was designed to be rugged and easy to repair. The driver's position was high, offering a commanding view of the road, or more accurately, the dirt paths that passed for roads in 1908. The controls were unusual by today's standards. Instead of a familiar clutch, brake, and accelerator pedal layout, the Model T had a system of levers and pedals that required drivers to learn a unique method of operation. There was a hand lever on the floor that worked as both the parking brake and part of the gear shifting process, while the pedals on the floor controlled functions like engaging low gear, reverse, and braking. It was a learning curve for new drivers, but once mastered, it became second nature. Passengers in the Model T sat on simple bench seats, with little padding, but for families who had never owned a car before, it was a revelation. The open-top versions exposed passengers to wind and weather, but enclosed body styles were offered later. The space inside was modest but adequate for its time, and it was revolutionary to think that average people could sit in a machine powered by an engine and travel miles beyond where a horse and wagon could reasonably take them. Now, when it comes to performance, the 1908 Model T wasn't powerful by modern standards, but for its day, it was impressive. It came with a 2.9-liter inline four-cylinder engine that produced about 20 horsepower. This engine gave the car a top speed of around 40 to 45 miles per hour, which was more than enough considering the conditions of early 20th century roads. The car's engine was mounted at the front and connected to a planetary gear transmission, a simple but clever system that made it durable and easier for average people to operate once they learned the basics. The Model T was also designed with versatility in mind. Its high ground clearance and tough suspension allowed it to drive over rough terrain, farm fields, and muddy tracks. Farmers, workers, and families could depend on it in ways no other car of the time allowed. It wasn't about performance numbers, it was about practicality, and the Model T delivered exactly that. Fuel economy was decent as well, giving about 13 to 21 miles per gallon depending on driving conditions, which in 1908 was more than acceptable. Drivers would fill it with gasoline purchased from general stores, and because America's fuel infrastructure was still in its infancy, it was designed to run on different types of fuel, including kerosene and ethanol if necessary. This flexibility made it a true workhorse for everyday life. Talking about price, this is where the Ford Model T truly earned its legendary reputation. In 1908, the first Model T was priced at around $850. That was still a significant amount of money at the time, but it was much cheaper than many other cars available, which often cost 2 to 3 times more. Henry Ford's greatest achievement wasn't just building the car, it was creating the moving assembly line a few years later, which allowed the cost of the Model T to drop dramatically. By the mid-1910s, prices had fallen to around $300 to $400, making it possible for the average American family to buy one. This affordability put millions of people behind the wheel and made car ownership a normal part of life rather than a luxury for the rich. It's fair to say that the Model T didn't just compete with other cars, it competed with horses and wagons, and it won. As for suggestions, looking at the Model T through modern eyes, it obviously isn't a practical choice for daily driving today. But from a historical perspective, it was the ultimate people's car. If you imagine yourself in 1908, this car would have been ideal for families wanting reliable transportation, for farmers who needed a vehicle that could handle rough terrain, and for individuals who wanted to experience freedom of movement in a way never before possible. The Model T was reliable, durable, and simple enough that many owners could repair it themselves with basic tools. That was part of its genius, it empowered people to be independent drivers and mechanics. If you were considering it today, the suggestion would be to see it as a collector's piece, a symbol of innovation, and a reminder of where the automotive world began. Owning one now means being a part of history, and for enthusiasts, it's priceless. To conclude, the 1908 Ford Model T wasn't just a car, it was the car that changed everything. Its simple exterior, practical interior, modest but capable performance, and revolutionary affordability transformed it into a global phenomenon. More than 15 million units were eventually built over its production run, making it one of the most successful vehicles of all time. It democratized driving, brought mobility to the masses, and laid the foundation for the automotive industry as we know it. When you look at modern cars, with all their advanced features, technology, and luxury, it's humbling to think it all started with a machine like this, built to be tough, affordable, and practical. Reviewing the 1908 Model T isn't just about a car, it's about a revolution, about a vision that changed how people lived, worked, and dreamed. That's why even today, more than a century later, the Model T continues to be remembered as the car that put the world on wheels. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into automotive history. If you enjoyed this review of the legendary Ford Model T, make sure to stay tuned for more stories of cars that shaped the past and continue to inspire the future.